What I chose as my title for this talk was to consider the role of farmers, advisors, government in demonstrating excellence in British farming. I really wanted to focus on the excellence. I'm naturally an optimist at heart, and I always try to see the good in things. And there's a lot of good about UK food and farming, but really I want to focus on how we can capitalise on the good stuff in food and farming and how we can communicate our messages clearly outside of our communities. Okay, so I hesitate to bring up my first slide because unfortunately it's got a quote from a politician, which in these days I'm not quite sure whether that's a wise thing to do or not. Anyway, well, I'll start with a quote from a politician. Ooh, audience gets the reaction. Whatever your politics is, this quote actually I think is a very valuable quote because I think it sums up quite a lot of what we could and should be about in UK food and farming. We will succeed in the global marketplace because we are competing at the top of the value chain, not trying to win a race to the bottom. And I think there's a lot in that. And there's around the food is great, what is really providing substance to that claim, that feeling that we actually are doing a good job. So that is my focus of my talk tonight. And I've picked out 5 things that I think we can focus upon in excellence in UK food and farming. They are not the only 5 at all, and there are many other ways you could come at this, but there are 5 things that I think that are doable and that we can focus upon. First 2 are around having an ambitious, credible vision and strategy for what we're about. And crucially, because we're a scientific institution here, it's about having an evidence base to support a national claim to justify that sort of vision. And then, from a more farmer-focused perspective, I want to talk about farmer-centred, data-driven innovation, a community of practice and social learning, which I'll explain that. There's a bit of jargon around there, but I think it's a very valuable jargon that we should, I think, get to grips with. And then I want to talk about advisor support within it. Now, but how I'm going to do this talk, I'm going to try to cover 2 aspects, and that is one, to introduce some new postgraduate courses that we've got, and I'm going to talk about some of my previous and current research and policy initiatives to give it a bit of flavour. But to do that, I need to introduce a little bit more depth about what this postgraduate teaching is. You have the leaflets in front of you explaining what the 2 programs are, which we were fortunate to receive funding for, but I need to explain a little bit about why they're new to the RAU and what they aim to do and how they work. So these are 2 new programs, an MSc and an MBA. They were crucially developed with industry. We had a series of industry engagement events last year where we really tried to understand what the industry wanted from us. We are doing a blended learning, which is a bit of HE jargon, I'm afraid, sorry. It's actually what it is. It's a mixture of distance learning and face-to-face contact. And we've done that because we wanted to produce a format that was highly suitable for people in work and also to maximise networking. Many people come to events here and they value the learning from each other. That networking event is a really important part of it. So the structure we've developed is for the part-time route, which is likely to suit those that are in work, a 2-year option with 4 short, i.e. week residential blocks. And for the full-time option, a 1-year course with 2 short residential blocks, 2 entry points, one in the autumn and one in the spring. There are some additional activities that are optional, and for the MBA students, there is individual career coaching as well to run alongside it. And we have, to deliver these, we've got this bit of a mantra of 4 pillars where we're trying to do. First of all, we're trying to inspire and be inspiring and be inspired, i.e. learn from others. The prime, especially the postgraduate, that is our prime resource, each other, and learning from each other. Reflect is so important these days, how you apply that to your own situation. Innovate, yes, we need innovation in these days, that's absolutely fundamental, but it's actually using an evidence base for that innovation. And lastly, leading, well really that's about working with others. As I say many times, it's not Winston Churchill style leadership, it's how to work with the team and bring a whole team along with you to achieve that. And so these 4 pillars are run through the 4 programs that we've developed, which are available from this autumn. Just a little bit about the structure of the 2 programs. So the MSc in Sustainable Food and Agriculture Policy has a set of 4 modules which are common to the MBA, which I'll describe. And these modules are very much focused on the skills of the person doing this. So they come away having better leadership, people skills, making sense of a changing world, which I'll talk about, data and technology, and then sustainable strategies. And then for the MSc, there are 4 specific ones which are about understanding the global challenges, positive impact at a local level, trust and integrity in the food supply chain, which Louise actually leads, and interaction with agriculture and food policy with consumers and citizens. And then, of course, because it's a postgraduate course, we have a research skills and applied project as well. And then the MBA has a similar structure, the same four common modules providing the skills, and then we have 4 specific modules which are related to the MBA activity around financial decision making, marketing, managing a supply chain, and delivering growth through entrepreneurship, and then the same MSCs. So what I'm going to do during my talk is I'm going to flag up in a couple of places, and there'll be a marker at the bottom where some of the material I'm going to be talking about is going to be embedded into these programs. I want you to see that our policy and research activity is embedded in what we teach. That is very much an important principle of our teaching. So that's why I've introduced it at this stage, so you can see it as we go along. So coming back to what I want to focus on, these 5 things which I think are important for demonstrating and believing in excellence in UK food and farming. And first of all, I'm going to focus on these 2. What should be our vision strategy for UK food and farming, and what is the evidence base to support it? I'm going to talk about general principles, but because of my animal welfare interest, I'm going to illustrate that sometimes with animal welfare examples and thoughts. First of all, we have to realise, before we can set a vision and strategy, we have to realise that we're in a changing world. There's fast-paced change all the time. There's an incredible time in this industry. And fundamentally, the food we eat matters. You need to be living under a rock not to realise this is an important topic. And it's in the media all the time. We have important policy outputs coming along all the time. And it's relating the impact of the food to the environment, and how we eat and what we eat really matters. So understanding this changing world is a really fundamental skill that we need to embrace. And the knowledge we need now is going to be different to the knowledge we need tomorrow. It's a fast-paced, changing world that's out there. So that's why the module around making sense of a changing world is one of the real important milestones for this course, because it needs to give you the skills to understand the changing world rather than the world as it currently is. We have to face challenges. The vegan changes in eating habits are very interesting, and how they're playing out in society, aren't they? And really, we need to know how to respond. Do we take the Piers Morgan type approach? Nobody was waiting for a vegan sausage, you PC ravaged clowns. Or do we take a more sophisticated approach to this approach? Don't forget he has many thousands of Twitter followers, so his message is going to get through. So we've got some very real challenges of how do we respond positively to these sorts of issues. Changing world, the impact of trade is fundamentally important. As we're currently, of course, looking at negotiating trade agreements. We had the US ambassador helpfully reminding us perhaps we shouldn't trap Britain into the EU's Museum of Agriculture. A nice catchphrase there. It was worth reading what he said, actually. And he actually said the EU approach prizes history and tradition over innovation and science. And he claims that American farmers are using all the scientific and technological tools at their disposal to address the challenges ahead. Well, we need to do that. We definitely need to do that. That is a very important part of what we do. But what I would urge a little bit of caution is around, are we bringing our consumers and citizens along with us in that journey? And I would say that the American politicians not necessarily fine-tuned to their consumers' interests. There is, on the animal welfare side, there is a clear and emerging pattern of consumers being more bothered about animal welfare. This is sometimes in the research papers, but it is also in the real-life policy decisions of the food companies in America. So this paper reports on the changes in the laying hen sector, where the major food companies are pledging cage-free systems for eggs, and that has happened without any federal legislation. There's been some state-level legislations from citizens, as it were, but the primary drive has been from the food companies. So this has been a very significant change, also affecting the pig industry as well. And I think the point here is that we need to be mindful of our consumers and citizens as well as we navigate this complexity that is emerging in front of us. So complexity is a really important concept to try to get our handle on, and that's a key part of the programs. As Joe says, I'm involved in the regulation of experimental animals, and I would say that's a complicated policy area, but actually not complex. Whereas the work we're doing in the calf sector, Emily's here and involved with in the calf rearing sector, actually I would say is complex. So for the experimental animals is actually straightforward in as much as one bit of legislation, it's not going to change. There's one regulator that has to implement that legislation, and of course the science it regulates is evolving, but the process is relatively straightforward, and it's quite clear what you're trying to do. You're trying to address societal concerns in that safeguarding process. Whereas with calf rearing, we've got the societal concerns are diverse and important. So, of course, the vegan agenda, the culling of male dairy calves, and the use of antibiotics. Those are significant societal concerns. And we have different players. So, of course, the food industry themselves are trying to grapple with those issues, and they each have their own different policies and different take upon it. And we have sometimes have industry groups like assurance schemes trying to be useful guardians, as it were, of those societal concerns. Plus we have, of course, the NGOs having a major influence on the food companies and their policy going forward. And as well, on top of that, this calf rearing sector sits astride two different sectors, the beef rearing sector and the dairy rearing sector, so it's sort of in between them. So that's my mind of complex. It's different societal concerns, changes over time, different drivers, a real difficult job to get a handle on. And if ever you hear a why don't we just, or why don't you just, then you haven't understood the complexity. That is not a sufficient answer. You have to be really alert to that why don't you just response, because you've not really understood the complexity of the situation. So complexity is so important. But there are some good, don't fear, there are some good writings, good thinking about complexity that helps us through. For example, this is a very easy, accessible book. It's actually available free online by a chap called Robert Chambers, who I'm going to come back to later. And he wrote a really nice chapter in here about understanding the difference between Newtonian, which is traditional science approaches, and complexity paradigms. Bit of social science jargon in there, but actually when you read this, it really does help you understand to make sense of this complex changing world. And Robert Chambers is very much an advocate of applying rigour in the sense of complexity, and you can do that in the same way as we do in the scientific approaches. So how does that complexity matter to our future vision for UK food and farming? Well, Minette Batters has important statements like, we know British people expect high animal welfare standards, responsible environment stewardship, good quality, traceable and affordable food. That's all good, good solid stuff we can get behind. But then, of course, it raises the question, do we have a moral imperative to maximise the production of food we produce well in the UK? Because there's a different narrative around there about food production, the quality versus quantity. It's complex. It's not an easy answer. We're not very good at producing oranges, are we? So it's not. We don't say all food. And then other players like a Red Tractor have important mission statements for them to deliver world-class standards, independent inspection and robust compliance. But actually, and I'm a very strong advocate of Red Tractor assurance. I've worked with Red Tractor a lot over many years, and I think they're a very solid foundation to build upon. But I think we can go and should go further in our vision, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. So I've wittered, shall I say, in various contexts about our potential animal welfare vision, and I've talked about a new era. The new era to me is not about government, it's not about food, and it's not about NGOs. It's about the combination of all those three organisations and delivering that new era. And it's a new era, positive era, around animal welfare leadership. And I think an important area where this can play out is around the concept of national level claims. So the Origin Green initiative in Ireland, you can critique the methodology of it if you like, but it's a very ambitious, interesting project because basically it's trying to substantiate the whole country's production being sustainable, and they've produced evidence to support that. And I think that's the type of thing we can and should be doing. And why should we do that? For two. One is that, of course, it's important for selling stuff overseas and for export. But the other very important reason is about the citizens within your own country, that you have their social license to do what you do. And so positive messaging about what you do is as important, I would argue, for the citizens as it is for selling stuff overseas. Okay, so the social license is a really important attribute of what they do. So if you talk to Irish citizens, I bet they would talk about, yeah, we produce grass and yeah, we produce meat, dairy. You know what I mean? That's the type of narrative that they're playing into. We need a similar sort of narrative that we can be proud of. So what's our vision for animal welfare? Well, as we've heard about from Red Tractor, about their stated goal at the moment is world-class standards, independent inspection, robust compliance. Absolutely, that's what it is, and that's what it does on the tin. It's not very positive and engaging and ambitious, though, I would suggest. As part of my previous research work involving lots of colleagues in these organisations, we have developed a welfare outcomes process that's been embedded in farm assurance schemes, and it's been collecting data about how animals are managed and what their health and welfare outcomes are. That is world leading. Nobody else is doing that training of inspectors, standardised inspectors, collecting data, publishing data, being transparent about it. We're doing that, and that's a genuine example of world leading. But it's interesting to see what other people are doing. What's New Zealand doing on their dairy side? They have a clear vision statement that they want to be world leading in on-farm animal care. And again, you might scoff about that. You might be, oh, they can't do this and they can't do that. But the point is they have a vision of what they want to do, and they have got a work plan to deliver evidence for it in the future, evidence and action. You can see it's called Dairy Tomorrow. Have a read about it, and they talk about developing a framework to ensure every animal is valued and treated with care and respect. By 2023, achieve all farmers implementing and reporting under the framework. Now we've got a bit involved with this because the framework they're using is based on some of the research work that I'm going to talk about in a minute, which talks about good life and positive welfare. They've actually seen welfare is not just about avoiding harms, it is about providing the good stuff and opportunities for care. And so they are taking which was originally a research framework, and seeing if they can use it. So you can see that it'll go from a farm level assessment through to a national level claim. That's their ambition. So what do I mean by positive welfare and good life? Well, this concept was floated in the Falk report. I was involved in the Farm Animal Welfare Council at the time in 2009. And actually, a lot of it is the statement of the obvious. And it is recognising that animals can have a good time as well as just not be harmed, as it were. And the key words in here, it talked about, the report at the time talked about the government should set goals to ensure that every animal has a life worth living, in other words, the minimum, and that a growing number have a good life. And what's a good life? And that's about provision of opportunities in the highest standard for an animal's comfort, pleasure, interest and confidence. And an opportunity that would be considered to contribute to a good life will be a resource, a thing, that an animal does not need for fitness but is value. This isn't about moving the goalposts. This is actually about recognising the value that farmers are already doing. Okay, this was a very important thing. In the report, it's very clear that this is not saying we want farmers to move more. It's more about farmers are doing more, and that value needs to be captured. And I illustrate that with some work we've done in laying hens. We developed a more practical, applied version of this framework for laying hens. And I haven't got time to go through the full protocol here, but I'll just explain the principle of it. The principle of it is take something like a good life opportunity for comfort, which is about birds being able to exercise individual preferences for their physical comfort at all times. We looked at the scientific literature and evidence base for that, and we recognised that there were some things, good life opportunities, that you can and some farmers are providing to birds which are not required by legislation or codes, but are the animals' value that they receive benefit from. Then Jess, who's joined us from the RAU, joined us here from Bristol as well. She was involved in a project which was looking at 49 non-cage laying hen farms, and on that she scored those farms that were giving these additional good life opportunities. And these were, we categorised into them different levels, welfare plus, welfare plus, plus, plus. And these 5 farms up here afforded at least welfare plus in all 13 of the tiers. And there was a farm down here who had 3. So there was a range, across the farms, there was a range of additional good life opportunities that these farmers were affording. And the farmers were doing that. These are the 13 individual tiers, and the black were elements that essentially were required by the relevant scheme. That was either RSPCA assured or Soil Association. And the grey were things, but actually they weren't a scheme requirement, but they were doing anyway. So these are things that the market isn't actually valuing. The farmers are not receiving any financial reward for these things. They may have some productivity benefits, but they are certainly of benefit for the animal. And they go beyond what is required. So farmers aren't getting the value from it. And so this is what I talk about good life. This is about recognising and rewarding farmers for doing more than they have to. And we also, working with an agricultural economist, were able to define what the costs of providing those things were. And what's interesting is a lot of farmers were spending a lot of money on these additional resources and again getting nothing in return. Now this type of analysis is actually important for potential public good payments in animal welfare in the future as well. So putting numbers to it is important. But the take-home message is farmers are doing this, but they're receiving no recognition for it. So further work on that. Jess again has been doing some collaborative work, working with groups of farmers to actually define positive measures for dairy and for sheep, and that was Scottish government funded work. And we've currently got a couple of pilot projects working with an HDB funded project looking at continuously housed dairy cows, and a collaboration with a nationwide veterinary practice called XL Vets, where they're collecting information using this protocol to see actually what farms are providing additional resources for dairy cattle. And the reason we want to do that is for the 2 things. One is, can this be used for national level claims? and could it also be used for public good payments for animal welfare in the future? So that's work ongoing, future data. So that's what I mean about the vision and strategy and evidence base. We should be positive, looking forward. What things can we describe about how we farm and communicate to our stakeholders out there, our consumers and our citizens? So now I want to move on to these other three areas around working with farmers and knowledge exchange, essentially. Knowledge exchange is an important priority for the REU. It's actually the reason why I'm here, to be honest. I knew this is what this place was about, and so that's why I came here. REU really is about bridging the gap between science, policy and practice. That's where we are. We're right in the middle of that territory. So to us, it's obvious that we should act as a knowledge hub to help industry navigate, change, uncertainty, making it possible to tackle big challenges and delivering societal benefit. That's what we're about. So how can we do that well is the challenge facing us. Well, actually this is an area for scientific investigation. And I've been on a bit of a journey. I've said this many times, but I think it's really important. We understand what that journey is for many people working in this sector. The traditional approach to knowledge exchange is a top-down, I've got the knowledge, you haven't got the knowledge, do as I tell you. And I come from a veterinary profession where that, I'm afraid, is still the mantra at veterinary schools. And so we secured funding based on that model where we thought it'd be very clever to come up with something called a husbandry advisory tool, which integrated all this clever information at a farm level and come up with different solutions we did it for dairy cattle lameness, tail biting in pigs, and injurious pecking in laying hens. Weren't we clever? We might be clever, but it actually is not what farmers wanted or needed, and so they didn't necessarily do what we suggested. Telling people doesn't work. Then we got a bit more sophisticated. We used social marketing approaches in the Healthy Feet project, which was really trying to understand the receiver of the information more clearly, and that approach has been embedded into the Healthy Feet program. And now, more recently, we had this great project called Henovation, which was an EU-funded project where we had groups of farmers working with scientists and their advisors and people from government, etc., working in small groups to tackle real challenges that they were facing on the ground. And a real evidence-based approach, but we're going to try to work out how to solve these challenges. And I'll give you a flavour of some of those challenges in a bit. But really, this is moving from a traditional advisor type function to a community of practice. I'm not saying the traditional advisor role is not needed. It clearly is, and it clearly is very importantly used in the veterinary context, for example, when a farmer has a problem and asks a vet for a solution and the technical solution is appropriate and works, happy days, the advice is valued and that's all good. And there's actually how they communicate that advice is another area of work using a technique called motivational interviewing. That's all good, but I also want to advocate the value of working in groups to learn. The group learning, the community of practice approach as well is a very valuable approach. So I want to talk about communities of practice and social learning. This is a quote from Wenger and Trainer who describe nicely the challenge. And I'm going to read it out because it's quite important. For many people, learning starts with something that's known. It's then transmitted to someone who doesn't know it. But for the projects we're involved in, this simple view doesn't work. In the real world, things are too dynamic and complex. Knowledge doesn't sit still. You've got to be on your toes. You've got to improvise, solve problems, strategize, jump on opportunities, and bring others along. The learning that matters today is social, in real time, and inventive. And more often than not, what we need to learn is not yet known. And really, that philosophy is what's embedded in the programs, the postgraduate programs that we're talking about today. We're not pumping stuff full of technical information that is going to be out of date tomorrow. That is not what is needed these days. We need to have this sort of approach of how do we learn from each other in a safe context, using evidence, etc., but how do we make it more proactive? The focus of this social learning is on its application. This framework that these folks use is about the value, about potential value, and then becoming realised value, rather than the value in the knowledge itself, or as many of us do in our academic career, collecting badges. You know, get a degree, and then you get a PhD, and then you have a postgraduate qualification. It's badge collecting, isn't it? Badge collecting doesn't solve problems. It helps you get to places, sure, but actually what we need is these sorts of skills to solve real-life problems. So I've seen in the Innovation project a real integration of science and practice. So we had a couple of networks we had here. One, a UK network, which was looking about how to transport end-of-lay hens to the slaughterhouse. A very practical project, but again, evidence-based, trying to collect information about how to do it in a better way. We had quite a high-tech project about seeing what UV light is needed, is better for laying hens in their environment. So it was solving real problems that the farmers had come up with, and then it was bringing in the right scientists. So it's using scientists. It's the other Winston Churchill quote, "Scientists should be on tap, not on top." It's not scientist-led, this is farmer-led. This is the different way round of working. So it's the power of facilitation that we need. This power of facilitation is being recognised in policy. Tom McMillan has joined us from the Soil Association. This is his Nature article about engaging farmers in research, and Tom established Innovative Farmers. And we have this approach being highlighted within the Health and Harmony policy paper. And it talks about we will focus on developing R&D funding to support high quality research through industry-led research syndicates, with groups of farmers coming together to deliver practical solutions and commission research projects with academia that improve the translation of R&D onto farms. So this isn't just a nice thing to do. This is real activity. There'll be real money for this. And this hopefully will encourage a change of working of how farmers work with scientists in the future. And to support that, we've established a farmer-led innovation network involving a large number of organisations that were already facilitating working with groups of farmers. And in that group, we want to share best practice about how to do that and build the capacity so that when funding is available, that we can support the farming sector to use these approaches. So that's something that's we're currently doing at the moment. And another thing which we're doing at the moment is the calf work that I mentioned that Emily is doing. We have an industry forum Friday actually where we're talking about reducing antibiotics in the dairy beef sector. And we're using our participatory approach in bringing people together for both the policy and practice level. And this is based on previous work. Previously, we had a project working with one dairy supply chain where farmers themselves were facilitated to come up with different policies that they believed should reduce antimicrobial use. Again, it was evidence-based. It was working with vets to inform that advice. But the ideas that they came up with in the policy were much more progressive than if a consultant had written and told the farmers what to do. So making policy involving those that it actually affects is very valuable. And Lisa Morgans, who's currently finishing an AHDB-funded PhD, has shown that farmer action groups can also be a huge, powerful way of farmers sharing ideas about how to change their husbandry practice to reduce antibiotic use. So we're using these two approaches for the calf rearing sector. We've got an important meeting on Friday to do that. So what comes around goes around. Just want to flag to you, this is all very exciting, all very new, but in fact, actually, it's nothing new at all. The title of this is A Fresh Perspective. Well, this was written about by a chap called Robert Chambers in the 1980s. He called it the Farmer First approach, and he talks about the key steps you need to analyse, consider the choices, and experiment. That's exactly what we did in Innovation. And to do that, you need a facilitator that supports by acting as a convener, a catalyst advisor, acting as a searcher, supply travel agent. The logistics really matters. It's about the food and water often. And then experimenting, supporting the experimenting, acting as a supporter and consultant. The difference is, though, there is a little difference in that approach was advocated in resource-poor production systems in developing countries. And the argument that why that applied was because simple high-input packages, the recipe type approach, do not fit well with a small-scale, complex, diverse farming systems in developing countries. But if you think about now what we've got in the UK, okay, we might not be small scale, but we're very complex. There's a lot of diversity. So you actually need a very similar approach in the UK food and farming. So we're recycling an old concept. And I use this slide quite often to highlight what actual personal skills we need to be able to do that job. And the personal skills we need, firstly, humility. We may have lots of badges, but that's what doesn't really what matters in the real world. We need humility to value all forms of expertise. We absolutely need an obsessive curiosity to understand the local complexity. If we start tripping into the why don't you just, we've lost it. We've missed the point. We have to to really understand the local complexity before we start doing why don't you just. And yes, we need confidence to support an evidence-based innovation. So I'm not saying leave the science, but use the science to support that innovation. So those are the three mantras of what we need to do in our facilitation role: humility, curiosity, and confidence. So where are we at? So as I said, the RAU is in this centre place. We're bridging science, policy, and practice, and we can do those. Use our role to help these ambitious, credible vision strategy and an evidence base, and to move to a more farmer-centred, data-driven innovation, community of practice, and effective advisor support. So I'm just going to leave you on these two slides. Okay, thank you very much.
David, thank you very much.